How's it going, everybody? My name is LuckyBunz, and in today's video we're going to be taking a look at Ursaluna's official movesets. Now with that being said, as always, if you guys do end up enjoying this video, if you do find it helpful, please make sure to smash that like button down below. It helps me out a ton with the YouTube algorithm. But with that being said, let's go ahead and get started. Oh my goodness, this has been all the talk today. Ursaluna's official movesets are terrible, but they're not actually horrible, and I'm gonna explain this because for PvP it's not looking great, but for the raid/gym meta, it actually isn't that bad. It's actually really funny because I said in my breakdown video, the one thing that would really mess up Ursaluna is if it didn't get Shadow Claw, and of course, without fail, Niantic decides to give it Rock Smash. Like, why would you give it Rock Smash? It did get Tackle, and thankfully due to Ursaluna's typing being a normal type as well as a ground type Pokemon, it does benefit from Stab, and that will actually have some good application in the raid/gym meta. So for the charge moves, in addition to High Horsepower, which is going to be an exclusive Comm Day moveset, it also got access to Fire Punch, Thunder Punch, and Aerial Ace. Now in my last video, I speculated that if Ursaluna ended up getting Earth Power, it would kind of mess up High Horsepower in terms of being a Comm Day move because Earth Power would essentially have been better, so I'm kind of glad that they didn't give it Earth Power because that just would have been a whole nother mess. But in terms of Fire Punch, Thunder Punch, and Aerial Ace is practically useless on it. Thunder Punch is pretty much useless as well. What we really wanted to get, and personally I wanted it to get Fire Punch, but a lot of people also wanted it to get Ice Punch, and this is due to its coverage in the Master League, which again we'll talk about more in detail later on in the video. Now of course, without further ado, let's go to talk about Ursaluna and the raid/gym meta, starting off with the base stats, which again I'm just going to cover really quickly since we went over this in my previous video. So Ursaluna's base stats are going to be as follows. It has an attack stat of 243, a defense stat of 181, and a stamina stat of 277. Once again, its stamina stat is phenomenal. Now interestingly enough, when Ursaluna actually got pushed into the game, it ended up getting different base stats for some reason, but this of course was just an error from Niantic's side. Now I didn't run the stats for Tackle in my last video, but I definitely should have, given that it does benefit from Stab. I just really didn't think that it was going to get Tackle, although I'm very happy that it did because Tackle is an improvement in terms of the raid/gym meta opposed to if it would have gotten Shadow Claw, and this is mainly because Ursaluna is also a normal type Pokemon, so it benefits from Stab, which does help it out a lot. Also, Tackle being a normal type move, it pretty much does neutral damage against everything. Like, nothing resists normal type moves, but then again, like, normal type moves don't have super effective damage either. So what I want to talk about next is the simulations that I ran against Raikou, right? So now we can really take a look at Shadow Ursaluna in an actual raid battle scenario. And we can see here, right, that Garchomp is still going to be your best choice with Earth Power, and then even without Earth Power, still running Earthquake, it's going to be better than Shadow Ursaluna. But with Tackle and High Horsepower, Shadow Ursaluna is going to be better than Groudon, Rhyperior, Excadrill, Landorus, basically everything else. Now of course, this is still Shadow Ursaluna. It's gonna be very expensive to power this thing up. So what about regular Ursaluna? So unfortunately, it's a little bit worse than regular Rhydon with Mudslap and Earthquake, which again, like, you could evolve that into Rhyperior. So yeah, regular Ursaluna is not looking too good. I mean, like, if you don't have that many ground type attackers, you could still build regular Ursaluna for the time being. Like, I would just grab as many high level Teddiursa as you can during Comm Day, evolve them into Ursaluna, and then just actually have a decent ground type attacker team. But you know, when it comes down to it in terms of the overall meta, you have so many better options out there. Like, literally, you have Garchomp, Excadrill, Groudon, Rhyperior, Landorus in its Therian form. Heck, even Landorus in its incarnate form is going to be better than regular Ursaluna. So yeah, honestly, it's really not that good. So putting that aside, I feel like our main focus here is just going to stay on Shadow Ursaluna for the raid/gym meta. Now the next thing that I want to talk about is going to be the comparison between Garchomp and Shadow Ursaluna. So one thing I really want to focus on here is going to be their typing and the resistances for these Pokemon. So let's say, for example, Raikou had Shadow Ball, right, instead of Thunderbolt or Wild Charge or any of those electric type moves. Garchomp does not have a resistance to ghost type moves, whereas Shadow Ursaluna does. So in this scenario, Shadow Ursaluna would actually be more viable because it's going to be able to tank those hits that much better. So basically my overall consensus when it comes down to Shadow Ursaluna for the raid/gym meta is that while it's not going to be at the top of the meta, Garchomp is going to hold that spot, it's still a pretty good option when it comes down to things. Like, especially because Shadow Ursaluna benefits from resisting ghost type moves, whereas many of the other ground type attackers don't. So in my opinion, that's a huge positive for Shadow Ursaluna, although you're probably not going to run into too many scenarios where that's going to be the case of them having shadow type moves, but every raid boss is different, right? By saying all of this, I don't really mean to power up a bunch of Shadow Ursaluna. You're gonna have better options out there, not to mention you can't get lucky versions of Shadow Ursaluna. So let's say, for example, you wanted to get a lucky Garchomp or a lucky Groudon, Rhyperior, anything along those lines. It's gonna be a lot more cost effective just to do that opposed to building a Shadow Ursaluna. But for those of you out there who have some really good IVs on your Shadow Ursaluna, or sorry, I should say Shadow Teddiursa or Shadow Ursaring, you could definitely build this and just kind of have one just because it's cool, and there's nothing wrong with that. Now with all that being said, that is just Ursaluna in the raid/gym meta. What about the PvP meta? Okay, let's take a look at this, and let me just say right now, brace yourselves because it's not looking great. So while Shadow Ursaluna held up in the raid/gym meta and regular Ursaluna was kinda mediocre in my opinion, when it comes down to PvP, the fact that Ursaluna did not get Shadow Claw is a really big deal. Like, Tackle's not that bad, it still benefits from stab, but in terms of the overall meta, it's a lot different than if we look at the raid/gym meta. Shadow Claw was very much necessary for it to be relevant in the Master League, and Ursaluna, like we already looked at this in my last video, but Ursaluna in the Great League and Ultra League, it's just too low of a level to actually make a dent. So, you know, in terms of its overall matchups, it's really not worth building for either of those leagues. The main league that you would want to focus on is going to be the Master League. So what I've gone ahead and done is that I've added Ursaluna with both Tackle and Shadow Claw, along with the charge moves for Fire Punch and High Horsepower, and we're going to take a look at this right now in terms of the comparison and how much Shadow Ursaluna, sorry, not Shadow Ursaluna, how much regular Ursaluna got shafted because it didn't get Shadow Claw. Now I do also want to mention that we're going to be doing this against a one shield versus one shield scenario with selective baiting on. Okay, so let's go and take a look at this right now. So on the top row we have Ursaluna with Tackle plus Fire Punch and High Horsepower, and then on the second row we have the Shadow Claw, or at least what would have been Shadow Claw, and we can see right here against the first matchup against Dialga, Tackle is terrible. It is really terrible. If it actually got Shadow Claw, this would prove to be quite viable, and Dialga is in the top of the meta. It's within the top 10, I believe, of Pokemon that you will see in the Open Master League. So it is quite unfortunate there. In terms of Dragonite, Tackle and Shadow Claw don't really make a difference, so that one was fine. Not really something that we were looking forward to. I guess I should also mention that if it's over 500 points, that means it's gonna win the match. If it's under, that means it's gonna lose the match. If it's closer along the line, it could really go either way. Guess it kind of depends on the actual scenario, but these are just simulations, so just gotta take it for what it is. Now if we take a look at Garchomp, we can actually see that Ursaluna with Tackle does take that matchup a little bit better when it's running Mudshot. So against Garchomp, Tackle actually is superior in this scenario, but you know, I feel like you're not going to see a Garchomp as often as you would see something like Dialga. Now the next one is a really big deal. So Giratina Altered and Giratina Origin Form. This was a really important matchup that Ursaluna was going to flip if it actually got Shadow Claw. Now we can see here Ursaluna with Tackle loses the matchup against Giratina Altered Form, but Ursaluna with Shadow Claw, yeah, I would have won that matchup. Even against the Origin Form, even though Ursaluna is still going to take that matchup, Ursaluna with Shadow Claw would have completely destroyed Giratina Origin Form. And once again, Giratina Origin Form is the Pokemon that you see more often than Giratina Altered Form, at least in my experience anyways. Next up we have Gyarados. That looks like a pretty similar matchup. Ho-Oh, surprisingly, it actually takes that matchup with Tackle, though I can't imagine you see Ho-Oh too often in the Master League. Kyogre doesn't make that much of a difference. Landorus here, it actually pretty much just stays the same. Like, you still take the matchup against Melmetal, and you still take the win against Metagross, but I mean, look at the difference here, guys. 812 versus 532. Like, you could lose the matchup against Metagross potentially, but you know, if it had Shadow Claw, that would almost guarantee to be your win. Against Mewtwo, we can see that it loses the matchup in both scenarios where it has Shadow Ball and Focus Blast, kind of unfortunate. Versus Sylveon, it's a little bit better with Tackle, but it's not a noticeable difference. Togekiss makes no difference whatsoever. Xerneas is pretty much on the fence. It could go either way, but with Tackle proves to be a little bit better. Yveltal, not really that much. Zacian, it's pretty much the same too. And against Zekrom gets a much better win with Shadow Claw. But some very key matchups that it missed out on was Mewtwo, Giratina, and Dialga. You know, like, that's a significant difference. I mean, Giratina Altered is pretty much the matchup that it ended up missing the most. It's still going to beat out Giratina in its Origin Form in the one shield scenario, But Dialga, man, that's a really, really big one right there. Like, even with Fire Punch and high horsepower, it just does not get the job done, and that really sucks. So yeah, like, Ursaluna in the Master League, it had a lot of potential to be really good. And again, like, all these Pokemon that we just looked at are legendary Pokemon. They are very, very resource intensive. Like, you actually have to grind through raids to get access to these Pokemon with their double moves, to get all the candy from rare candy, or just even from raiding it a bunch. Ursaluna would have been a very accessible choice. And I'm not saying it can't get Shadow Claw in the future, that could definitely happen. We've seen these sort of things happen in Pokemon Go. So when it ultimately comes down to it, I would still try to get a Hundo Teddiursa during Calm Day if you don't have one already. Evolve it to Ursaluna, get high horsepower, and hopefully at some point in the future, maybe in like one of the GBL season updates, Ursaluna will get access to Shadow Claw. I mean, like, seriously, fingers crossed on that, because if it doesn't, then its overall like relevance in the Master League, while it's not terrible and it is going to take some matchups, it would have been a lot better with Shadow Claw. Now, there is actually one more comparison I want to add here as well, because Ursaluna could have also gotten Ice Punch. So let's just pretend here for a second. Like, this obviously isn't going to be the case in Pokemon Go, but like, if it did have Shadow Claw and Ice Punch, this is pretty much how the matchups would have looked. So it's on the very bottom row here. So against Dialga, it pretty much has the exact same matchup. You know, you're pretty much good with Shadow Claw. Like, that's the key factor difference there. Against Dragonite, though, it actually does a lot better. Very close to actually having a neutral matchup. Against Garchomp with Ice Punch, that's a difference. That is definitely a noticeable difference. Against Giratina Altered Form and Giratina Origin Form, significantly more damage against Giratina Altered with Ice Punch. Giratina Origin Form doesn't make a huge difference comparatively. Gyarados, that actually does flip the matchup. That's very interesting to see. Ho-Oh, not so much of a difference. Landorus, oh my god, that's a massive difference as well with Ice Punch. Landorus in its Therian form and Incarnate form. I should say that the Therian form is probably more common to see than the Incarnate form, but some people do run it. Against Lugia, that would have flipped the matchup as well too. Ice Punch, yeah, Ice Punch would have been really good on Ursaluna, so you can see that my boy got robbed here. It really, really did. Against everything else, more or less it looks the same. Togekiss would have been a much better matchup as well. So yeah, Ice Punch and high horsepower kind of looks like the optimal moveset for Ursaluna with Shadow Claw. You know, I kind of thought that Fire Punch would have been the go-to, but no, it's kind of looking like Ice Punch definitely would have got the job done better. You can see what Ursaluna got robbed on. Didn't get Ice Punch and didn't get Shadow Claw. And, you know, the top row here is what we ultimately see with Ursaluna. Again, scrolling through, look at the difference. Like, that just sucks, man. And, you know, in terms of the overall average, it would have won 22 times it would have won, lost 9 times, and then tied once. Yeah, it would have been so much better if it actually got access to this moveset. And it totally could have, guys. Like, it had access to these moves in Pokemon Legends Arceus. This was on the table. Niantic just chose not to give it to it. So in conclusion, when it comes down to the raid/gym meta, Ursaluna does hold up decently well. I mean, Shadow Ursaluna is pretty much going to be the prize though when it comes down to the raid/gym meta. If you don't have that many good ground type Pokemon though, you could still build some Ursaluna just for your ground type team temporarily. Like, obviously they're going to be replaced in the future, so I wouldn't power them up, but if you catch them at a high level and if you evolve them straight to Ursaluna, no Stardust investment, they're going to be battle ready. That's what I ultimately do recommend. And then when it comes down to PvP, you can see how much Ursaluna got robbed, but move pools can change. Like, we've definitely seen this happen with many Pokemon, and Ursaluna could have its time to shine in the future. It could definitely happen, so I would still try to get a 100% IV or even a 98% IV during Calm Day. Very much possible given the spawn rate, and just save it for Master League. Like, don't power it up just yet. Just keep it in your Pokemon storage for a rainy day, and then hopefully in the future we'll see Ursaluna's move pool get updated, either getting Shadow Claw or Ice Punch. I mean, in order for it to be actually meta relevant in Master League, it would need to get Shadow Claw. Ice Punch would make it better, but it doesn't like really need it. It would still be viable if it just got Shadow Claw. So fingers crossed that does actually happen for Ursaluna at some point in the future, but that's pretty much everything I got for you guys in this video. If you want some additional tips and tricks, you guys can check out these videos right here. But before you go, don't forget to smash that like button, subscribe, and I'll see you all real soon in the next one.